And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's keep it going with more of these top political headlines. We're going to bring into the conversation right now our friend, political analyst and consultant, Brian Sobel, to talk about some more of these trends and storylines and plots as we are 42 days away. And Brian joins me. Brian, good to see you here. It's been a while. We got a lot to talk about. I want to bring up this, though, because this is a issue that's being talked about today on how Harris comes down on the filibuster. This rule in the Senate that you need 60 votes to move anything forward. She wants a carve-out for that, meaning she doesn't want it in place for any legislation that might come up if she wins on abortion, on codifying Roe v. Wade, on restoring those protections here. This isn't a new position for Harris. Why is it getting so much attention, do you think?
Well, I think it goes, Andrew, hand in hand with some of the other things she said. I mean, filibuster being one of them, but the idea that the Supreme Court ought to either have term limits or otherwise isn't working because it's not working in the favor of Democrats. We've heard that certainly from Joe Biden. So the problem here is that if something doesn't work and it's traditional, then it ought to be eliminated. It seems to be the idea that Harris is putting forward. Same with the idea of whether the popular vote versus the electoral college matters to people. There are rules and structure in place, and they've been there for a really long time for a reason, and filibuster is one of them.
Okay, so Brian, someone in the Senate isn't really taking this lightly. That's Senator Joe Manchin, the independent from West Virginia. He put out this statement today saying as follows. He says, "I've been consistent on the importance of protecting the 60-vote threshold, which we call the filibuster, since I arrived at the U.S. Senate." He says the threshold stabilizes our democracy, promotes bipartisan cooperation, and protects our nation from partisan whiplash and dysfunction. He says, "I've always said if you can't change your mind, you can't change anything." And I'm hopeful that the vice president remains open to doing just that. Manchin went even further, Brian. He said this: he is not endorsing anyone in the presidential race, although he wouldn't say if he will still vote for Harris or not. That's saying something coming from not too long ago, a previous Democrat. He's now an independent, saying he would endorse in the race, but not ruling out whether to vote for Harris or not here. So is this just Manchin being Manchin? And my other question to you, Brian, is this. Our battleground state voters, our swing state voters, are they up to speed on the ins and outs of Senate rules and decorum? Will this bring them to the ballot box or no?
No, this is inside baseball, Andrew, but it does matter to people who understand the importance of the 60-vote threshold, the filibuster, this idea that if you don't like a rule, you just get rid of it, whether it's proposed by Democrats or Republicans, is not healthy for our democracy. These rules have been in place for a really long time because they work. And the minute you say, hey, I can't win under the current rules, so I'm going to change the rules, that is not beneficial to the American democracy. Regarding Manchin, he's been in a very tough spot for a long time. West Virginia is a tough state to be a United States senator from because there are a lot of Republicans. There are a lot of people that are supporting Trump in West Virginia, and Manchin is a former Democrat, now independent. And he's trying to thread the needle, Andrew, between Dems and Republicans and through these issues. But where he can find solace and a safe place is on the rules of the Senate. And I think that's what you heard him talking about today.
All right, so Brian, we're 1 week away from yet another debate, not between Harris and Trump, though, between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance here. So I just want to preview for our viewers our coverage of this. Will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, both before the debate and after the debate. I guess I'm going to ask you The same question on a different story on whether or not something matters. Do vice presidential debates matter, Brian? Do they move the needle, or are they just good TV?
I don't think they move the needle much, but I think in this particular case, I think the Vance Walz debate will bring in a lot of people out of curiosity. Let's face it, America does not know J.D. Vance, and they don't know Tim Walz. And I think to that extent, I think people will want to see this debate just to size up these two people, to see how they support their number ones on each side of the aisle. I think it's going to get a lot of eyeballs, to be honest with you.
So we do have some reporting in, Brian, to suggest how J.D. Vance is preparing. This was in Fox News Digital earlier today, that Minnesota Congressman and the House Majority Whip Tom Emmer is standing in during mock debates to help Vance prepare for his debate with Governor Tim Walz. So he is acting, I guess, as Tim Walz in these mock-up debates to help Vance prepare. Vance has spent the last month reviewing debate plans, strategies, and potential tough questions. He's been doing most of his preparations at his home in Cincinnati or in online sessions with his team. Prep sessions have included members of Vance's inner circle, as well as Trump campaign strategist Jason Miller and his wife, Usha Vance. You know, Brian, I'm always kind of fascinated by how these candidates prepare for big national televised moments like this. And I think it's safe to say after the Biden-Trump debate, anything can happen after a debate politically and historically here. So preparation is key, is it not?
Absolutely. And there's a fine line between being prepared and being over-prepared. In the history books, we learned that Ronald Reagan, in his first debate, presidential debate, did very poorly and was quite frustrated by his own performance, and so were people around him. And it was pointed out that he had gone into several days of intense preparation, and they had crammed him so full of facts that essentially Reagan wasn't Reagan. And so in his next debate, Ronald Reagan said, hey, I've got enough information so that I can go into a debate, but I have to be me. And so this fine line between being very, very prepared, having all the statistics at your fingertips and everything else is fine, as long as you don't forget that you have to project your own personality to the American people. They have to see somebody who's not a metrics machine, a statistics genius. They want to see somebody who they can envision, in this case, as a president, if the president were unable to continue serving.
Yeah, that's always the question for Veep candidates. Could you, would you, will you be ready on day one if the opportunity presents itself? We also know that Tom Emmer was chosen to be a stand-in for Walz because he's from Minnesota, like Walz as well, and the Vance campaign folks are saying because of Emmer's folksy manner as well. We'll see if that helps. Brian, lastly here, I know you know your way around polls. And something that I've noticed, something people have noticed as we're 42 days out, excuse me, is that the national head-to-head polls with Trump and Harris, Harris is slightly ahead. But when you dive into them a little bit more in the battleground states particularly, Trump is doing much better, especially in these Sunbelt states like Nevada, in Georgia, in Arizona here. What are we to make of that, that Harris has a slight advantage nationally, but Trump is still doing well in these battleground states?
Well, overarching in terms of polling, these polls are all within what's known as the margin of error, either way, 2.5%. So you're not seeing, Andrew, any of these sort of 5-point, 7-point, 10-point leads. So the conclusion here right now is that this race is essentially dead even. And those Sunbelt states that you talked about, where Trump has a slight lead, he's slightly behind in some of the other states that are what people consider the battleground states. And so we're going to see how this materializes. But it's all of this is just too close to call right now. The numbers, and we're seeing them come in daily now, are just so close, terrifically close. And so I think you're going to see some additional ebb and flow here as we move closer to the election.
You're right, though. I mean, it just seems like, I mean, we're getting inundated by so many polls that have so much data, and you can draw out what each and every one means, whether or not they're bellwethers for anything, since we are still 42 days away. I mean, a lot can happen, obviously, in 42 days here. Brian, what are you watching for coming up?
Well, I do think the vice presidential debate will be interesting. I don't know that
Okay.
it'll move the needle.
Okay.
And what I would say, Andrew, just as we kind of draw to a close here, is you have to remember, not you, but the viewers have to remember that there are very few people at this point overall who are undecided.
Okay.
This is a pretty fixed race at this point. So you're trying to move 3, 4, 5%,
Right.
and how that breaks out among various demographic areas of the country and the demography around race and religion and everything else is still to be seen. But we're only talking about 4 or 5% moving one way or the other to decide this election.
But Brian, to that point, though, I mean, who is still persuadable? Is it independent voters? Harris is doing much better with independents than Biden was. But can Harris and/or Trump still persuade the people who are undecided here? Do they have that in them? Or if they do, is there a difference between them on that front?
Well, you're trying to move independents to your side of the ledger. And it's true that if you're a Dem and you went independent, you still have Democrat feelings, to put it that way. And same on the Republican side as well. So it's important for these candidates to essentially reach across the aisle to pull in independents and Democrats or Republicans, depending on who you're trying to go after, who just cannot get behind the candidate. So the Dems that really just can't get behind Kamala Harris may decide to break the other way, and people who can't get behind Trump may break the other way. But it's, again, a small universe. So you're going to see lots of advertising and other reaching out to that effect. And in fact, you've seen a lot of recent ads now being put up by the Harris campaign talking about she's going to be a president for all Americans.
Right.
What's that message there?
Yeah. All right, Brian. So we're going to have to leave it at that. Can't thank you enough. I know we'll be talking very, very soon, Brian.
Absolutely. It's great seeing you, Andrew.
Yeah.